Kate, Marion, and Christine, come on up. Right, welcome. While they're getting set up, this is, I think I was really happy that we have two change management discussions on the agenda. I thought this morning's was interesting while they sit down. I hear the same thing over and over again at firms, and one observation that I've made for years is that firms talk about change management at the beginning of projects, then they don't invest in it, then they're ready to launch. Then they hire a trading company, a training company. Training company has no idea why they're there and what problems they're trying to solve. They deliver training to the lawyers. This is the key part of how law firms approach change management. You need plausible deniability because it's always the lawyer's fault. And so can you please solve that for us?
Sure. As the only non-lawyer sitting here on the stage. All right, well, good afternoon. Thanks for hanging in there on Friday afternoon. And we'll jump right in. So the title of our session is deliberate. If they build it, not us, but them, they'll actually show up. So what we want to do is go through a couple of case studies with my esteemed panelists. We'll introduce ourselves here in a second, and then a little bit of Q&A, and hopefully you all have some questions as well. So without further ado, I'd like each of my panelists to introduce themselves and a little bit about what their backgrounds are and sort of what brought them to being in a position to encourage adoption. So Christine, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, thanks, Kate. Thrilled to be here. Thanks, everyone, for staying with us. Hope you'll get some practical guidance and we can have an engaging discussion and share some thoughts on this really timely topic. So I am the Director of Knowledge and Innovation at Paul Weiss. I have had a kind of squiggly path to K&I. I started, as many of you, as a transactional attorney in big law. Then I went in-house and I was at the management consulting firm McKinsey for 22 years. And that really enabled me to take some of the learning, particularly on K&I, from the consulting side and start to apply it on the legal side. And then most recently, I have been working both at Fenwick, where I met Kate and Marion, and now at Paul Weiss. So very eager to share some of those learnings with you.
I'm Marion. It's great to be here. Like Christine, I'm a former practicing attorney. I was a litigator for a few years and then left my litigation job to be a librarian. So I'm one of those weirdos who went to law school to be a law librarian, and I sort of accidentally practiced for a few years, enjoyed it a little more than I thought I would, but found my way back to libraries. I was at Stanford Law School for about 4 years as a reference librarian and also did a lot of teaching, taught legal research. And I think if there's one thing that's as hard as getting lawyers to change how they work, it's getting law students to really engage with legal research, which seems really abstract and not super relevant to their lives when they're 1Ls, but quickly becomes very important. So found my way back to Fenwick, where I was most recently the senior manager of our practice knowledge and innovation team, leading a group of K&I attorneys and also former paralegals who made the switch to the K&I path.
Excellent. And I'm Kate Kane. Obviously, I'm going to be your moderator today, and I had the great privilege to work with both of these ladies when we were all at Fenwick as part of that journey. But today I'm the Chief Knowledge and Innovation Officer at Shepherd. My journey, again, I'm not a lawyer, doesn't stop my family from calling and asking for legal advice because I've worked for lawyers for 26 years now. But I've always been the project manager, the business analyst, the data analyst, sometimes the voice of reason in the room on the project. But my role has always been focused on adoption. And really recall having a conversation with a leader in a past life at a previous firm saying, well, the adoption campaign starts at the very beginning, that very first conversation around the project. If the first time you're thinking adoption is when you're writing the email announcing the rollout, you're already too late. You can recover, but you got some road to travel. So what we thought we would do is jump into a couple of very specific case studies, projects from our past lives that really approached adoption from a very different angle, and wanted to sort of walk you through what that experience was with both of those case studies and then do a little Q&A. So we're going to start with I Want a Red Weld. So that's our first case study, and Marion's going to walk us through this particular case study, and it looks like the issues got garbled. There were no issues. The issues were in Morse code, or I don't know what that is, but
It might actually be appropriate because when
it kind of is.
when this started, this started with a conversation with someone in practice management who kind of casually mentioned to me that the litigation group in particular needed a new DMS. Okay.
Easy peasy. We were just going to go buy a new one.
Skeptical and intrigued, and so. I asked some follow-up questions just to kind of get a sense of what was going on, and it was really vague, as you could imagine, but the initial ask was, well, we need a new DMS because we can't find anything that we're filing currently, and so the new DMS is going to fix it. This actually goes back to where we started this conference, and how much of it is the technology and how much of it is the people and the process around the tech. So I went into investigation mode, and so I talked to some folks in the practice, met with the practice group leader who had just really strong feelings about this, that he really wanted a system that was as easy to use as an old Red Weld that had, he actually had a little prop.
On his desk and he
yeah,
waved it around.
so I thought we were just having a regular Zoom call, and all of a sudden this file folder is taking up the entire monitor. He's like, this is a Red Weld. I would put folders in it. I would put documents in the folders. If I wanted to find a document, I would go to this and I would pull it out and it would be there. And so, I again went into sort of follow-up question mode and like, okay, so what is it in particular that you liked about the system? I'm kind of a nerd for paper, so if it's a tactile thing, if it's, I don't know what he's looking for. It was just the findability. He just wanted to be able to find the stuff he needed to find. That's a lot easier than trying to replicate, I don't know, some other weird, virtual Red Weld situation. So the partner is only one part of the group of people that needs to interact with the file. So I started talking to some more people, talked to associates on the team. They actually had pretty similar concerns to what the partner said. They just wanted to be able to find their stuff. They had the added wrinkle that different teams they were on were using different filing systems. So sometimes the case team would use iManage, which is the DMS. Some people were using OneDrive or a shared folder, and it was really annoying for the associates that they had a different system to learn with each team they were on. Secretaries, they just wanted to know how to file stuff and where, and they had opinions about where stuff should go.
Lots of opinions.
Lots of opinions. But in this, sort of fact-finding, I was starting to get a bigger sense of what the actual problem was. Then I talked to IT, and I said, so I'm hearing Lit saying they need a new DMS, and they're a little perturbed that you won't give them one. What's going on from your side of this? And their approach was to say, well, they have so many options. They have iManage, they have OneDrive, they have, shared drive, like a file share system. They have a network drive that we ask them not to use, but they still kind of use it sometimes. So many options, and yet they want something else. Why would I give them something else when they have all this stuff? So it was interesting for me, getting injected into the middle of this sort of back and forth, figuring out that, I understood what both sides were looking for here. And what they needed was sort of a mediator to come in the middle and try to figure out how to pull it all together. So, we needed a system that was designed in a way that worked for the legal teams, but that was also designed in a way that wasn't going to create headaches for IT down the road. And so, one of the blank parts on the issues slide is the design. Starting with that, so we started with it was an uphill battle at first because there was this assumption on the legal team side that the new DMS, this mythical new thing, was going to solve all the problems. And going back to the panel we heard from earlier today, where lawyers are very skeptical, I say this as a lawyer, and they have a real sense for when someone's trying to persuade them. I took the approach of talking to the practice group leader and said, hey, I hear you on wanting to improve the findability here. Rather than just going out and purchasing something right now, I didn't even want to get into there's no way we're going to do this. But rather than going out and buying something right now, we actually have some stuff in-house that I think I can get you most of the way there with what you want. Would you be open to a demo? Cool, he's open to a demo. A little 20-minute meeting. I will say that, in terms of minutes of prep per minutes of meeting, this one was right up there in anything I've done in my life. So I ended up talking to secretaries, talking to paralegals, other attorneys, talked to IT to help figure out how we wanted to tackle this from a design perspective. And then I reached out to probably some folks in this room, colleagues at other firms, people at iManage, at the vendor. They want to see their tools succeed too. And put so much work on the front end, on the design side of things but like Kate said, that's really part of the adoption campaign from the start, was just getting over this hurdle with the PGL. And came up with a neat system, I think, and they think so too now, where we started with a really rigid, minimal set of folders that people needed to work with. We stuck with a minimal set of basic folders that auto-populated, but then added some options for people to choose new folders from a pick list. This solved some of the customizability issues that the legal teams had. And then we added an additional option to create new custom folders, because sometimes a case really does need a custom folder. We don't want to make it too easy for every case to just run wild. Got IT on board with that from the very first design phase, got the legal team on board with that, had this little pitch meeting with the practice group leader, and little pitch meeting, right? It was 20 minutes and so much prep. And he started being very skeptical. He's got a very dry, sarcastic sense of humor, which I just love. So jokes were flying at the beginning, and then by the end, he said, I don't want to throw up. Let's do this. And so which was high praise, honestly. But let's do this meant we were going to pilot it with 3 case teams. And we picked 3 teams that were different, had different things, different qualities we wanted to test it on. And we said, okay, so what we're committing to is just running with these 3 existing cases. Let's test it out. It actually worked well enough that we had people banging on our door to expand the pilot. And again, going back to what we heard earlier today about scarcity, it was like this nightclub that not everyone could get into, this pilot of iManage. But, it felt like a cool new thing when it was just, hey, let's use the DMS.
To be clear, people lining up to be part of a pilot so that they could have things put in folders.
And it was, yeah. And then, so we had to restrict access to the pilot. And then we realized that was actually helping us sell it. So we were like, oh, I'm sorry, we really can't. And at first, the pitch was, okay, we're just going to do this on a going forward basis. We're not going to touch what you've done before. Honestly, the legal teams needed to hear that at first. that we're not trying to mess with what they've got. This is just going forward. Really, before the pilot was over, we had people saying, hey, let's retroactively go back and take all of the stuff we've done before and convert it to the new system. So it was a really neat, the pace felt excruciatingly slow to me because I, and probably a lot of other people in this room, would like to be able to think we could just say to someone, hey, you should save your files somewhere you could find them in a structured way, and that people would be like, oh, let's do that. But going really slowly and getting a lot of folks on board at the beginning really helped it go almost faster than we wanted to or could handle by the end of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, definitely an example of, go slow to go fast
Yeah.
and engaging people at the very beginning. All right, so we're going to come back and ask some more questions, but then I want Christine to be able to talk us through her case study that also had no issues, but flipping the script. And so working with our corporate practice, and you have to keep in mind that the practice leader that Christine was working with us on this was, just say that he was the one that in any of the associate skits was portrayed as a robot, and not in a flattering kind of way. Ken was very focused and rigid. But Christine, they came to you with what they thought was a totally reasonable request and was a little nuts, but you were able to turn it around completely. Walk us through that.
Sure. So switching gears to the corporate side, I was invited to do a tools training for our incoming associates. And in the past, it was basically a 45-minute typical demo. Here are the tools. So I thought, well, what if we flip the training? I had read about and spoken with some of our McKinsey learning experts before I moved to the law firm side, and they had introduced a new apprenticeship model. So I thought, well, how about if we try it out with these new associates? So I pitched it to practice development and to learning, and we got some junior associates from the different practice areas, and I asked them, hey, could you put together a mini assignment, kind of the typical assignment you'd get as a first year, and can you pick an assignment that includes our core technology tools? So they dutifully did that, and they actually got really into it. It was really kind of fun working with them. And we designed a program where we flipped the training in multiple ways. We first did the pre-work, so we used the 45 minutes actually to share learnings rather than to work on the assignments. So that was number one. Number two was that we asked the first years, after they had completed the assignments, to come together as a team and to then teach the other first years about their assignment, because each of the teams had only one of the three assignments. And then finally, we also engaged both the junior associates in developing the mini assignments, but also senior associates in supervising the assignments. So the feedback we got at the end of the program was, we want more mini assignments. We want to do not just one, but we want to do all three of them as part of the training. And we also want to see more mini assignments across the board. So to me, this was an example of building engagement from the bottom up, as Sally was describing. And I have tried to take some of those learnings and share them more broadly, because I think they could apply not only to legal training and legal tech training, but also to training more broadly. So I have included a new framework that I'm calling Spark, and I swear I did not know that Eric was going to use a 5-letter word starting with S for his framework. So hopefully you'll remember the two, Spark and also Stamp. But if you want to learn more, there's a short article in the ILTA peer-to-peer that just came out, and it's on my LinkedIn. Would love to hear your feedback and also thoughts on other techniques that you have found helpful or challenging.
I think what was really interesting about this particular project was, Christine was really underselling it when she said, 45 minutes to teach all the tools. There were like 15 different things, everything from capital IQ as a way to do research to contract compare as a way to proofread and like all of the things in between. So it was literally 45 minutes to help showcase every single tool a corporate associate might possibly need, which is kind of crazy. And the beauty of enlisting the junior associates to create the assignments, they had to know enough about the tools, which means they had to kind of teach themselves to figure it out. The senior associates hosted these Q&A sessions, so they had to go learn the tools so they didn't look stupid in front of the junior associates. And then the first years, and I remember during the process, we had a good chuckle that some of the first years said, excuse me, there's not enough information here for me to execute this assignment. And we're like, right, welcome to being a first year. So it really was kind of
intentional.
It's absolutely intentional. It's like, and what would you do to figure that out if this was a real work assignment? You'll have to go talk to someone, right? So a little bit of prompting, but it really turned the table so it wasn't us showing what buttons to push, it was them teaching themselves and teaching each other and really made it stick. So, there was a pithy quote there in that bar. I don't remember what it was now. But, I think our K&I team was uniquely positioned to be able to draw connections across a variety of areas. And, Marion talked about working with IT and with the secretaries and everybody within the case teams, and Christine working across all levels within the corporate practice. And so, the K9 team, we kind of took on, sort of 4 key roles here. The first one with the magnifying glass had a clever question mark in the magnifying glass. But the idea of being an investigator, right? Like the initial ask wasn't quite what they needed. I knew it when I had the ask. You guys knew it as soon as you heard the ask. And both of you had to ask some more questions around what was the actual goal to get that to the surface. And I also recall there being a little bit of friction as to, so why are you asking me questions? So would love for you to, Christine, maybe we'll start with you, sort of talk a little bit about how you worked your way around some of that friction. Why are you asking me questions? I just told you to go do training for 45 minutes. How did you kind of investigate what you really needed to know in order to pull this off?
Yeah, great question. I think, part of it is starting with the human element and, building the trust in the relationship. So by the time I was asked to do this presentation, I had already worked with those colleagues, and we did already have that foundation of trust. So I felt comfortable basically presenting another approach. And I'm just a naturally curious person. So I'd like to kind of keep up with what's going on and connect dots. And I really presented it as an open-ended question, what if? So it's kind of the sense of possibility. Could we explore this as an option? And presenting it in a very low-key way, because we only had a few months to put this together. Just how about if we pilot? People always feel a little bit more comfortable when they know we're not going to change necessarily kind of all of the training for forever. It's just, let's try it, see what kind of feedback we get. And in this case, we were very fortunate that it was generally positive. There were some suggestions that we incorporated it in the kind of next iteration, but that's why I feel that it's all part of an experiment. So if you approach it with that mindset, then yes, we may fail, but we'll learn something along the way and we'll make it better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, Marion, you ran into a similar sort of friction in that, the ask that came to us was genuinely, we need a new DMS just for this. And it's like, okay. And then if it wasn't going to be a DMS, it was going to be a this or a that or a whatever. And starting to ask questions, it was a little bit of, why are you asking me questions? Talk a little about working your way around that.
Yeah, I think while I definitely have that reaction of laughing and eye rolling and maybe some 4-letter words about the casual request for a new DMS, it's nice to do that within ourselves. But with the folks who are asking the question, like Christine said, I try to stay really curious because people are not maybe this is too sunshine and rainbows, but I really think people are not trying to be unreasonable or jerks or ask for things that
least
make
not
no
everyone.
sense. Yeah. And I think even if they are, it's kind of nice to approach it as if they're not, maybe for my own sake. So it really, if someone says something that doesn't make sense or comes to you with a request that makes no sense to you, it's probably because there's some sort of information asymmetry happening, that they know something that you don't know, or they have a perspective or a feeling or a fear that you don't know, and that you have the same that they don't know. And so, I think that helps me have those conversations in a way that helps me actually get to the bottom of what's happening a lot faster than if I went in really hot with, no, we're not buying a new DMS. This is silly. Use what we have.
Yeah, and I think it's like getting at the inspiration behind the ask. Like, why are they asking that question? Digging a little deeper. The next role I want to talk just a little bit about is the idea of being a leader. And I think in this, I suspect this applies to many of you as knowledge, and I feel like I've got my back to the folks way over here, sorry. Being a leader in the knowledge and innovation space, often being that sort of connector between lots of different teams and organizations. It's really easy to get sucked into being the doer of the thing, having to take on all of that burden, when really the project itself required being a leader. And Christine, I think particularly with this training example, there was a real risk of you having to take on being the trainer for all of these tools. And you very deftly navigated right around that. So how do you achieve that balance? How do you kind of keep yourself out of the weeds?
I think part of it is just about managing expectations and being clear up front about roles and responsibilities. So in that particular example, you're trying to build the buy-in, but you also want to bring people in so that they own it. So I basically drew up the design and then made it clear who would be doing what. And things kind of naturally fell into place. But I do think investing that initial time up front in scoping, either asking the questions or being clear about roles and responsibilities, really helps to have kind of buy-in from the beginning. And then, essentially it was, our team was responsible for design and kind of overseeing the project. So I would set up the meetings and have the agenda and follow up to track for project management purposes. But really, I left it pretty open-ended for the associates to develop the mini assignments, which then became a template. And it's partly using some of these design concepts. Initially, the mini assignments that they came back with were all different. So yes, I could have asked for them to be consistent, but we were going for an MVP. And then in the second round, we said, well, how about if we take a fresh look and then maybe create a template? Yeah. So it's kind of being in the moment and understanding what you can do within the constraints that you have.
Yeah, and I think, jumping to the sort of that next role, the idea of a diplomat, people had those different perspectives, those different sort of points of view or approach. And Marion, you got to sort of play UN negotiator between lots of different levels, from the secretaries who had very specific opinions, the associates that were just trying to get their hours in, the partner waving the red welt around. Like, how did you navigate that sort of need for diplomacy between those different groups?
I think coming into all those conversations with empathy is helpful. And that's sort of a trite answer that doesn't say a whole lot, but I think it's important to say. But I really found that, sometimes people had like a process reason behind something they were asking for. And that was helpful for me in coming up with the design, because I would certainly want to design around sort of process expectations people have. But sometimes what was underlying the ask or the gripe is not so much a concrete process, oh, this happens, how will we handle it, but a fear or a need that people have. And I think getting to the bottom of that is really helpful when you're negotiating between different groups that are maybe at the outset in conflict about what the outcome will be. For example, in this, I mean, it sounds so basic, but I think we all know it's not. Coming up with a file structure that's going to work for a whole practice group to manage the official file. One of the things that we were surprised to learn was, I mentioned there was variation from case to case, matter team to matter team, about how the file was run. It was actually the secretary that was making that decision. And so while at first I would have thought, oh, okay, maybe all this partner's cases are saved in this way and all that partners are saved in another way, it was going the other direction. And so if we came in with, just a very top-down, this is how you have to manage the file sort of approach, that would take away a lot of autonomy and authority and real, like, honest to goodness wisdom that the secretaries were bringing to the teams and figuring out what would work. And so we managed to incorporate that into the design in that very first phase, before the pitch to the partner that ended with, doesn't make me want to throw up. We had talked to a lot of secretaries and came up with this system that would work with them and would work with IT to give them a little bit of flexibility to customize each file. And I think that sort of thing, like accommodating that sort of need, goes a long way when you're navigating tough situations.
Yeah, and I think that gets to this sort of fourth role of the director. I think the difference between a good director and a great director is knowing when to go off script, right? Is knowing when to pivot, when to veer off of the original plan to a better plan, sort of jump to the next set of tracks, right? And I think, both of you guys have already described how, things that you learned along the way, you were able to apply and make sure the next wave a little bit better. Were there any surprises or surprise U-turns or rerouting? Any surprises that jump out to you, Christine?
Not so much in this one, but I guess the biggest surprise for me was just the engagement. So, the purpose was to build engagement, but I never expected, for example, when we had our planning call for the next version, the junior associates themselves said, well, why don't we get the current first years involved and kind of pass the torch? So it became its own flywheel. So we were basically just facilitating, and we came up with the initial idea, but they took ownership to such an extent that now it's kind of sustainable adoption, which is really what we were hoping for from the beginning. So a lot of it is just kind of going with those twists and turns and being open to having things evolve in a more organic way.
Yeah, excellent. All right, so we've got 2 minutes and 39 seconds left. Would love any questions from the crowd? Or similar stories, or anecdotes, or requests for therapy, whatever you need. Good, they're still awake. Excellent. Anyone? Oh, wait, we have.
Ooh, there's one there.
There's one, a couple. There was one there where, and there's something that way. So. We don't get penalized for the time it takes Patrick to stroll all the way over there, right?
Thank you. This is in my wheelhouse. One of the things that I found that was most helpful once you got the consensus for a design is that to preclude the who did this anyway, who made these decisions, why did you make these decisions, is that once everyone comes to a decision, the practice group manager gets presented with the folder design and a sign off so that when the next person comes back and says, I don't know anything about this, who made these decisions? I just think it's helpful to have that in your back pocket because they do happen.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a hand here?
Mike.
Speak loudly if you want.
Sure, go for it.
What role do you see vendors playing in the adoption process? How involved do you want vendors to be directly in the adoption process of a technology that has already received all the buy-in, et cetera?
Excellent. Well, I'm going to take a swing at it first, and I want you guys to jump in. And I'm going to answer this from the perspective of from when I was on that side of the table. So in March of 2020, because the world wasn't weird enough, I decided enough with the law firm thing. I went to work for a startup that was Foundation Software Group at the time, and then we got purchased by Latera to meet Mike. And having that opportunity gave me a chance to work with lots of people at lots of different firms. I got a terrific chance to work with many of you. And I bring that experience back to my role now. And so, when we're looking at implementing something new or revisiting something we bought a while ago that no one's using and we want to make sure that they're using, what I would love to hear from my business partners, my vendors, is what have they seen work well and what have they seen not work so well. You don't have to name names, although sometimes that's kind of fun, but you don't have to name names, but like, what works well, what doesn't work well. Give me everything you got. I need good documentation. I need thoughtful recommendations on configuration decisions or deployment strategies. I'm going to decide ultimately what I need to do for my organization, but I'm looking to you for your experience because you've had a chance to try it or do it in lots of different venues. And so I think that kind of advice and counsel, what I find the most frustrating, and I recall this vividly from a project in my early days at Sodley, working through, we're essentially sort of building out a data schema and said, okay, to the vendor, what is this field supposed to mean? And he looked at me and said, well, what do you want it to mean? It's like, that is not helpful, nor is it responsive. And we changed. So really provide me the benefit of your experience working with lots of different organizations so I don't repeat their mistakes. I'll make my own. I like to be original, but give me the benefit of your experience and provide that advice and counsel, and so we can move that forward.
I think just building on what Kate said, real creative problem solving. I think, for folks who are on the vendor side or consultants, you all see this at so many different firms. For those of us who are on the firm side, we are in our, little fishbowl bubble. Yeah. And that gives us some deep expertise into maybe firm dynamics that you wouldn't be aware of, but you all are really well positioned to, tell us what other people are doing and what we should consider doing.
Or not doing.
Or not doing. And that's super helpful too. Not just like do this, but, reasons why something might not work.
I would just add your typical lawyer answer, it depends. I think there are some tools, where the business model is we're going to offer white glove service, which includes training and onboarding. And then, particularly for startup vendors, the question is, well, is that really sustainable? Whereas there are other more established vendors who have well-developed customer success organizations that also include communities that they create so that peers can share their own use cases. But I think it is the full spectrum, and it depends on the particular product.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, ladies. Excellent presentation.